Welcome back to the Done Deal Show. Yves Bissouma, very close to completing his move to Tottenham Hotspur. We're delving into that today. We're going to stay in North London and focus on Arsenal and their moves for Jesus. We're going to be taking a look at Christian Eriksen. Where will he end up? Man United, Tottenham in a two-horse race. We're going to take a look at the PSG manager as well. Who's coming in, who's going out, what's going on in that scenario, plus a little bit more. I'm joined as ever by Ben Jacobs. How are you, my friend?
Good afternoon. I'm actually sporting maybe the longest ever beard of my life. I think it's just about as long as Manchester United's wish list this summer.
And that is long. We've seen how long that is. There's 77 links, I think I've counted so far, but there we go. Lots to delve into. So I think we'll start as we mean to go on, really. Neymar's exit from Paris Saint-Germain. What's the latest? And is there a chance of maybe a Premier League arrival for the brilliant Brazilian?
Well, there's been speculation, hasn't there? Neymar, Chelsea, Thomas Tuchel back with him again. But actually, I'm hearing the opposite from PSG sources, which is contrary to the rumours. Neymar won't be exiting this window. And although the interest from the Premier League is of appeal, no club has yet made any sort of agreement or advanced talks. And even the inquiries are few and far between. And the reason for that is because PSG are in a period of transition. So a lot of people think that somehow, and wrongly, by the way, Kylian Mbappe is going to be determining everything at that football club and somehow doesn't want to work with Neymar. But the reality is that Neymar is waiting to see who the new PSG manager is going to be and what the impact of Campos will be at that football club, and then will determine his future. He is a player for the right deal, and I'm talking about a personal deal, could be persuaded to move to the Premier League. But right now, there's no substance in this notion that he's going to be leaving PSG imminently.
So it sounds very much, as you say, like, well, let's wait and see who the new manager is, what the new director of football wants to do, and then maybe, just maybe, there's an opportunity for somebody should that situation kind of present itself. So, which I think makes a lot of sense for a lot of people when you actually break it down in that way. Which is also another reason why you may see certain clubs maybe delay the signings of some attacking players, because you know what you don't want to do is shoot your load too early. I can't think of a better phrase, if I'm being honest, Ben. It's almost a little bit Man City. I always wonder how much you think Man City regret the Grealish deal only for a day or two later Messi to be available, if that makes sense. There's almost this element of maybe, just maybe, some teams will wait a little bit to see what happens.
I think you wait and see. You have to agree a package with Neymar, which is not a given. And ironically, the teams that would have the money to fulfill Neymar's financial aspirations were he to move on would be more in evolving leagues or ones that want Neymar the brand, not Neymar the footballer. And Premier League clubs won't quite look at things in those terms. And I'm not saying that Neymar to, let's say, hypothetically, Chelsea wouldn't provide Chelsea with the opportunity to tap into new markets and to use him in a brand sense. But obviously, an MLS club, for example, might choose to fund that transfer and find the money because they know that Neymar gives a lot more than just on the football side, whereas Premier League clubs want the finished product. They want a player that they can develop with long-term potential. And still, even when you sign someone for the long term, you're looking at sell-on value as well. And Neymar obviously doesn't provide that. So he'll wait and see. And obviously who he ends up playing under if he stays at PSG is a big question. Mauricio Pochettino's future is now finalized. So exit talks are taking place, but only on the financial amount. It's been determined by both parties that Pochettino is gone. And I fully expect PSG to announce Pochettino's departure at some point this week, or at the latest by the first few days of next week. But finding a replacement is going to be really intriguing and will probably take a lot longer than most are currently reporting. A lot of people are just assuming that somehow Zinedine Zidane has agreed terms and is the favourite for that role. But my understanding from PSG is that they are talking to several candidates, including Gaultier at Nice, and that nothing has either been agreed or determined at this point. And from Neymar's perspective, he'll want to assess who he's going to be playing under first, and then he'll establish whether he is or isn't going to leave PSG and when.
Which, as you say, which makes a lot of sense. Which makes a lot of sense in relation to into that deal. Jose Mourinho has been a name that's come up in relation to the PSG job. Is there any, as far as you're aware, is there any truth in that?
No chance of Mourinho going to PSG. It's as simple as that. Not only is he happy at Roma, but he's simply not a name on their shortlist. And I think that the reason why you get these links constantly is because QSI and Qatar around the World Cup, around sports tourism, are very interested in Mourinho. And Jose Mourinho has visited beIN Sports on a number of occasions historically, where he's been a pundit and he's met Nasser Al-Khelaifi, and they have a relationship. So naturally, people either see that, hear of that, or look at that and think, well, Mourinho's got links with Qatar. Mourinho is friendly on a professional level anyway with Nasser Al-Khelaifi. Why not PSG? But my understanding is that strategically, PSG do not see Mourinho as the right fit. And if you look at managers historically, and this again might count against Zidane, that PSG have gone for, it's not in that Mourinho mold. They aren't going to surrender 100% transfer control to a manager like Jose Mourinho. Yeah. The manager tends to be a star name and has some say, but in their recruitment model, they'll never be given absolute say on transfers. And Mourinho, actually on beIN Sports, so a Qatari broadcaster, has said that when he considers a football club, he wants to ensure that he's the one building the foundations. He's the one that has full autonomy over transfers. And that was part of the friction at Manchester United. And that's why he's enjoying life so much at Roma. And he's only just brought in, for example, a player like Nemanja Matic, and he's starting to shape that team with his identity now. And I just don't think that he's the right fit for PSG. PSG know that. But I'm also firmly of the opinion, talking to Roma sources, that he's happy in that culture, in that climate, and at that football club. And that's why he won't be going anywhere this summer.
And I think that all makes a hell of a lot of sense. That there's no doubt about it. In terms of the Premier League today, of course, we've seen a very big signing, in my opinion. Not huge in money at £25 million, but Yves Bissouma, pending a medical, will be a Tottenham Hotspur player. They're doing some very, very good business as things stand right now. There's also been talk of Gabriel Jesus today. I think Matt Law has confirmed, another journalist now confirming their interest. It just feels like slowly but surely the Gabriel Jesus Tottenham links, another journalist kind of mentioned there's an interest. There also talks about some other players coming in there. Spurs doing good business. Do you expect more to come from them?
Absolutely. Spurs qualifying for the Champions League has changed things far more dramatically than most Premier League clubs, really. I can even think back to my team, Leicester, when we qualified for the Champions League. And of course, we spent a lot more, and not particularly wisely, by the way. But most teams that are in the Big Six are budgeting and planning, come what may, for a spend, and qualifying for the Champions League or not doesn't drastically alter that. And Arsenal is a good example. Even in historical years when they've qualified for the Champions League, they've still spent quite conservatively. Liverpool, whether they win a Premier League or don't, whether they go far in the Champions League or don't, haven't hugely altered their spending plan. But Tottenham, because of Daniel Levy, it feels like a big deal. They qualify for the Champions League. Suddenly there's a big lump sum invested that Antonio Conte can spend on transfers. And they've moved very quickly in the market. The goalkeeper, Fraser Forster, Ivan Perisic, and now Bissouma, three good, sensible, quality signings that add depth in areas where Tottenham needed to strengthen. And I think that 25 million, even for a player that only had 1 year left on his contract, is a bargain signing. Bissouma, extremely consistent. And in terms of other suitors, not that many in the market, which is perhaps a little bit surprising when it can be difficult in his position to find a true specialist. Aston Villa had a bid rejected. Historically, that is about it. Some will tell you that Arsenal were interested in Bissouma, nothing advanced. Others will make links between Dan Ashworth and Newcastle and say that they were in the mix, but it is simply incorrect. Newcastle have got Bruno in red hot form and Joe Linton in that vague position, or certainly the central area of their midfield. So Bissouma has crept under the radar a little bit. Brighton were resigned to the fact that they weren't going to be able to keep him unless they just ran down the contract and then didn't get a transfer fee. Tottenham have moved quickly in the market, which isn't something that we have said too often in recent seasons. But this combination of Champions League football, of injection of money from Daniel Levy, and the fact that Conte is clearly making his mark are leading to a number of quick signings early in the window. And Kane won't go anywhere, and Son won't go anywhere. I'm pretty confident in saying that, talking to Tottenham sources. If Tottenham hadn't qualified for the Champions League, maybe a different story. But Bissouma, really smart bit of business. And that is also good news for Arsenal, because it means that they're very unlikely to hijack the Tielemans deal, because I don't see them bringing two in that position. And therefore, the knock-on effect, as you find with windows, is Tottenham get their man, and it opens the door for Arsenal to complete the Tielemans deal, probably now without too much competition.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Tielemans deal, because I remember when you first spoke about this on the terrace, maybe 3-4 weeks ago now, that there was almost an adjustment period where they just let things settle, go back to the player, explain the project again. Yes, there's no Champions League football, but we're still the right place for you. Almost reselling the idea of joining, which it appears that's gone on. I know there's been international football that's kind of delayed signings of some of the European players that are at the Nations League, but Tottenham were always there in the background, as you know. And maybe it's a case of, if Bissouma would have picked another team, Tottenham would have increased their interest in Tielemans, meaning Tielemans is waiting. It's now clear. Would you expect Arsenal to make an official move soon for that player to try and take him off the market?
Yes, but also no, in the sense that they've made de facto official moves for the best part of the last 6 months. So what we find increasingly in the current climate is that negotiation with the club tends to come last. And you can argue that two ways, just so people understand the process of a transfer. Sometimes it's last because it's a formality and you're either going to activate a release clause, or you just know that your offer is going to be accepted through verbal conversations. And that's why a lot of the time you hear verbal agreement. And other times the negotiation is last because it's leverage, and it's far more logical to go to the club with an agreement with the player, and then the football club is on the back foot because they know that their player wants to leave, and that can speed things up, or it can get you to where you need to be. So yes, Arsenal have not put down an actual official offer to Leicester yet. And if there is negotiation, the price could be 25 million to probably at the highest end 32, 33, 34 million. I doubt it will be any higher, but I've said on previous shows that Leicester would like to get back what they paid for Tielemans. But then when you look at Bissouma at 25 million with a year left on his contract, Arsenal would see Tielemans as sort of like-for-like value, like-for-like length left on the contract, and they'll be hoping for a deal closer to the lower end of that bracket at 25 million. But Arsenal feel they've always been front runners. I was one of the first to report on this transfer all the way back in January. And at that point, Tielemans wasn't really on the radar or in the media domain. But now I think it's very clear that Mikel Arteta has two primary targets, Jesus and Tielemans. Some are saying Rafinha is creeping into the conversation, but there's a lot of other clubs interested and it's not as advanced. Tielemans has been very advanced. Arsenal started talking to Tielemans' camp in the summer of last year to discuss the availability and work out what an exit from Leicester might look like and to what price. And at that point, it was clear that Leicester were not going to sell so early. In January, they went back and started talking about terms. And now Arsenal are in regular conversations with Tielemans' people. Personal terms will not be a problem to agree. It's all about just working out the fee with Leicester City. And now the international break has ended. I expect that deal to be wrapped up pretty quickly, but certainly before the month is out.
Wow, big news there. Big update from Ben Jacobs there. 2 weeks of this month to go. Tielemans could be on his way in. It is advanced, as said just there. And I think you mentioned the Rafinha situation. A few people in the comments were asking about Rafinha, what can happen with it. That just feels like a lot of teams are in for him, but that's going to be a hard one for Arsenal with the Champions League teams looking at him as well, I would assume.
Yeah, very early stages and a huge amount of interest. Liverpool supposedly were also interested, and some say that they still might move in the market even with Núñez arriving. and Manchester United, Arsenal, some even believe Barcelona. And the farce, as I've said many times with Barcelona, is they keep being interested, admiring, making offers, even putting offers in for players when they don't have the squad space. And if they also want to try and bring Lewandowski into their squad, they're going to have to get rid of De Jong, Dembele to clear the space and the wage bill. And I still don't think it's right that they are allowed to sign someone before they have space in their squad, which we've seen in previous windows, sanctioned moves, and then a wait, and then an offload, and then a registration. If you cannot register the player at the point of purchase and transfer of funds, then you shouldn't be allowed to sign them, in my opinion. But that's a whole nother rant and debate. But Rafinha is heavily in demand. The transfer fee is going to be well in excess of 50 million, and there'll be add-ons and so on. So this is one to watch. And I think the Rafinha saga, unlike Tielemans and Jesus, is going to drag throughout the duration of the window. And Leeds have brought in some players already. Brendan Aronson is a very good signing. Leeds have to accept, based on last season, that they are starting from the position of a club from the outside in that are in a relegation fight. And they've got a great history, a superb fan base, a lot of ambition. Jesse Marsch is a very tactical, strategic, scientific coach. And on their day, they can get a result against a big team, but they're inconsistent. And surprisingly for me, because we know they're leaky, we know their risk reward, but they just didn't score goals last season. So then to get rid of Rafinha and sanction that move, they're going to have to find goals from somewhere, because he was a huge source of creativity. And I think if they lose Rafinha and don't replace him, or even if they keep Rafinha, if they don't find that focal point, that source of goals, they're going to once again be in big, big trouble next season. So I think from Leeds' point of view, they won't sanction Rafinha's sale before they line up a source of goals. And that's not going to happen overnight. And therefore, they need to be in a position where they drag this out over the summer if, and it is still an if, Rafinha is going to be sold.
Listen, a great breakdown there, Ben. I can't even pronounce that. Jabob77 says, keep up the great work, Terry. Rafinha come to Liverpool, baby. Liverpool fans wanting him on that right-hand side. Viewers, make sure you're smashing that like button for us today. We need your help there. So smash the like button. Make sure you're subscribing to the Football Terrace and turning on the bell notification button as well. A few people asking for Chelsea updates. We'll move on to Chelsea. We'll move on to Christian Eriksen a little bit later in the show, as well as touching on Fofana. We'll have a little touch on Lewandowski as well and what's going on in that space. But it's sort of staying in North London. I mentioned it a moment ago. Gabriel Jesus, you've already said Arsenal's primary target. Chelsea and Spurs, though, both linked to him from some fairly credible journalists, the likes of Nazir Kinsella, Matt Law, spoke about an interest being at play, the deals being open enough for there to, there being an interest in there. Maybe nothing advanced at this point. Can you see something happening in relation to that deal for Gabriel Jesus to Arsenal being hijacked? Because it is another week and still it's open for anybody to get involved in.
I wouldn't call it hijacking, first of all, because let's not forget Jesus was effectively offered to Chelsea as an option. And prior to that, Arsenal were already interested. So we're not really getting somebody coming late into the market and hijacking a done deal. It was never that advanced with Arsenal. And I should point out as well that Arsenal, if you talk to Arsenal sources, still consider themselves the front runners. So they believe that they're going to get Jesus and Tielemans as a double and relatively early in the window. And unlike potential names that we've discussed, like Rafinha, this is a transfer saga again that is now going to conclude very quickly. And you know that because Manchester City will not tell us what number Erling Haaland is going to wear. And Erling Haaland will wear number 9 at Manchester City. And who is the current number 9 at Manchester City? Gabriel Jesus. So it is obvious and has been long before Haaland arrived that Jesus will leave Manchester City and has a desire to stay in the Premier League And any talk, for example, of Real Madrid coming in and hijacking the deal is untrue. He will move to the Premier League and he will move to London. And the two primary candidates are Chelsea and Arsenal. There is some interest from Tottenham, but I don't actually think that Jesus will be sold on a Tottenham move, even with that lure of Champions League football, because why is he leaving Manchester City, having actually finished the season pretty strong? Because he wants game time. And if you turn up to Tottenham Hotspur, are you guaranteed to start week in, week out as Gabriel Jesus in every Conte system when you've got the joint Golden Boot winner in Son and Harry Kane still at that football club? And I would say the answer is no. If you move to Arsenal, you're the focal point of the attack. You're a defined striker and you're playing in all the big games. And I think that's the appeal predominantly of Arsenal. And Chelsea are a bit more opportunistic in the sense that they have seen unexpectedly, if you'd have spoken to the football club 6 months ago, that Lukaku is gone. They need to find a striker. Amanda Broja is not necessarily the solution, although Thomas Tuchel, as I've said many times, wants to review him in pre-season to see what he's got. But Chelsea will need a marquee forward when Lukaku ends up being an outgoing, and that is why Jesus has been factored into their thinking. So both of these clubs are in a straight race, and it's unclear at this stage whether Jesus can be persuaded by Chelsea and Champions League football, or will continue his original thought of moving to Arsenal, where the club has really been sold to him. So I think Arsenal remain the favourites in that one. And I think Chelsea are the only other club that could change his thinking. And I really don't see a realistic possibility of Jesus joining Spurs.
And I think that's fair that the Harry Kane factor plays a big part. I've felt all along with Chelsea, they can do it if they guarantee him that number 9 role. You will be our main man. I think if he's promised that and sort of to a degree guaranteed that, as long as he's performing, of course, that could be the decisive factor, because I just get the sense from him, and it's come through conversations with yourself and with other people, that he just wants to be the guy. He wants to be the main man. He wants to be the leading number 9 in a team for a number of reasons. So like Arsenal winning that race, do you feel like that as well as Tielemans? You've mentioned quickly, you talking sort of end of the month, you would expect that this sort of transfer, wherever it is that he goes, to be done and dusted?
Jesus may take a little bit longer than Tielemans, in my opinion. When I talk to sources, they speak of Tielemans being done by the end of the month. I know there's some Arsenal fans that are just putting 2 and 2 together and saying now the international break is over, it will move quickly. And that may be true, but also slightly on the optimistic side. But the thing with Tielemans is that Arsenal have been courting him for a long time. So the specifics of the deal are not that hard, because you've got a player that wants to join and Arsenal can compensate him better than Leicester. And then you also have a football club in Leicester that know the contract is winding down and have accepted that 25 million to 32 million is the ballpark they're going to get. And over $1 million or 2, I don't see Arsenal quibbling. So unless Leicester change the price or suddenly determine they're going to just let that contract run down, which would be hugely fought at Tielemans' end because he wants to go this summer, it's a deal that can be completed without any hurdles. With Jesus, it's a little bit harder because you've got multiple suitors involved. And not only can that allow Arsenal to negotiate quickly to try and blow everyone else out of the market, the downside and the flip side is that if someone else does come in late, it delays everything because it puts question into Jesus's mind, but also it allows Manchester City to try and maybe get a little bit more. So one of the things that I've reported over the last few weeks is that when originally valued, Man City wanted 55 million, Arsenal were the primary suitor and said that's too high. Some negotiation took place, and eventually Manchester City determined they would put Jesus out on the market, which is why you suddenly heard him being, in inverted commas, offered to football clubs for a little bit lower. So now the lowest price that Jesus could go for is in the early 40s. But obviously, if Manchester City could meet halfway and get sort of 50 odd million from a football club for him, they would absolutely love that. And these things slow transfers down because you've got multiple suitors. You've got a roughly 10 million bracket that the price could increase and decrease by, depending on offers. And the longer that Jesus stays in that market, around the early 40s, the more interest there'll be, because the club might lose a striker and need a striker, and that merry-go-round movement could delay that deal a bit longer. So I think Tielemans will come before Jesus, but Arsenal may argue otherwise, because Arsenal will say, well, we're going to be decisive, which is not a word we normally associate with Arsenal in transfer windows, decisiveness. But what I would say is, if they're to give themselves the best possible chance of getting both those players, they do need to act quickly in the market, because the longer the Jesus saga drags on, the more likely other suitors are to come into the market, which is why now Arsenal are front runners for both. But if we have this conversation again in 2 weeks at the beginning of July and he's still available in the market, it wouldn't remotely surprise me if another suitor starts to play catch up on the Jesus deal.
And I totally get that. And I think that's why we're seeing football fans, we mentioned it backstage, that, you know, Arsenal, Chelsea, United, there is an element of panic starting to set in. Now, it's crazy levels considering we're 2 weeks into not even 2 weeks, a week into the transfer market. But there is that feeling of, if a couple more strikers and a couple more other midfield players get purchased and bought up around Europe, the market shrinks, the opportunity to buy players shrinks, and then teams turn their heads and go, well, Gabriel, as you say, Gabriel Jesus is still there, Tielemans is still there, and they could be seen as sort of sitting ducks in terms of that, because Arsenal fans, whether they want to admit it today or not, are frustrated at the Bissouma to Spurs signing. They may not all have wanted him, but Spurs are improving that squad very, very well. They're tipped to sign 2 or 3 more quality players, the likes of Jed Spence, and a good quality centre-back, the link to, you know, Bastoni, Pau Torres and others. So it looks like there's going to be a lot more work going on at Tottenham. So Arsenal will want to kind of get that cleared up and off the market sooner rather than later. In terms of Chelsea, it's quite a few super chats that have come in here asking about, we'll kind of get to them in a few moments. But one player that's been linked with Chelsea and whose name keeps coming back up from an attacking point of view, away from Gabriel Jesus, is Raheem Sterling and his exit away from Manchester City. Has much changed in the last sort of 6 or 7 days around his possible exit from the Etihad?
Not a great deal. I mean, the clubs, the earlier ones like Arsenal that were circling Sterling, were exploring that possibility and getting back from the Sterling camp that he would never decide his future until the end of the season. And we're not that far into the end of the season if you give a player a chance to at least have a holiday and then come back, to have had too much movement. The only concrete thing that sources make clear is that Raheem Sterling is perfectly open to a move to London, whereas perhaps 2 weeks ago there was some doubt. Funnily enough, that was always what I was told. And at that point, it was Spurs and Arsenal who had reached out to inquire whether he might be available. And a lot of people had said at that point, he'll never move to London. That's not his preference. Some even said that Spain would be a likely destination. But my understanding is that Sterling is actually open to a London move. And it is Chelsea increasingly that are eyeing up that signing and have overtaken Arsenal in terms of the most likely destination. There's no truth that Sterling has officially turned down a Bayern Munich or a Real Madrid, and there's no real substance that Bayern at this stage would come in for him. People were putting 2 and 2 together and saying Bayern need goals and attacking options. Lewandowski is most likely going to Barcelona, and therefore Sterling would be a good signing. Real Madrid's interest was not concrete ever. Bayern certainly looked at Sterling, but haven't taken it too much further than that. Whereas Chelsea are actively exploring the possibility. And the stage this transfer is at is, what price is Sterling going to go for? It hasn't gone too much further than that. So Chelsea fans will read stories saying he's open to the move. That's true as far as I'm concerned. And again, agreeing terms with Sterling is not expected to be a possibility, because he's accepted the fact that he may well leave Manchester City during this window. But what hasn't been agreed yet is the valuation of Raheem Sterling. And I think that Manchester City, unlike Jesus, are going to be quite firm and rigid in the number that they want for Raheem Sterling if they're to let him depart. And the clubs chasing Sterling probably don't believe that that valuation is market value at this particular stage. We always get this with a transfer. We're so early in the window that if Manchester City slap 60 to 65 million on Sterling, that's normal. And then you have to negotiate and work out, do you have to pay that up front? Is that 60 odd million plus add-ons? Is that 60 million non-negotiable? Is it actually 40 million with 20 million paid if X, Y, and Z happen? And from Arsenal's point of view, they're not going to pay 60 million for Raheem Sterling, but they might pay 40 to 45 million. So again, similar to what they want for Jesus. But then if they qualify for the Champions League, or if Sterling scores 15 plus goals, they may be prepared to pay a little bit more. And I think that Chelsea would be more open to a lump sum fee, a base fee, if you like, that is a little bit higher. But still, the Clearlake Bowley group at Chelsea are all about market value. And right now, there is a discrepancy between what the buying clubs think Sterling is worth and what Manchester City would like for the player. And that is why that transfer is not imminent for any of the clubs being linked to Sterling.
Yeah, I hear that completely. A Chelsea fan here says, will Chelsea sign, I think, suitable, like someone like a DM this summer, or will they deliver another shambolic window? I think that panic from Chelsea fans, you can see it in that super chat.
I mean, look, the Chelsea fans were brilliant and patient, if anything, predominantly during the takeover. But now the window's open, they naturally want to see some substance behind the new ownership group. And I do think the panic is not down to just what Chelsea need. It's because they're not under Abramovich. And Chelsea fans are used to Abramovich being cutthroat. And the good side of cutthroat in the market is spending a ton of money quickly and decisively. Whereas a new ownership group, even under members of the old regime, will have to come through a transitional period. The money's there, fear not, Chelsea fans, to spend during this window to the tune of 150 million, and maybe even opportunistically a bit more if the right player becomes available, i.e. a Declan Rice. Unfortunately, that's not a possibility this window. But my point is, if you're Chelsea and you've allocated, let's say, 150 million for the men's team, and the women's team have already made 2 good signings, by the way, so it's untrue to say that Chelsea haven't moved in the market. The men's team just haven't signed anybody yet of note. But there's about 150 million there. And if a Declan Rice was to suddenly become available, or somebody to that tune, maybe even a little bit more, because Chelsea are comfortably within profit and sustainability and financial fair play, especially with the COVID adjusted figures. So who might they realistically bring in? Well, first of all, Jules Kounde for me is de facto a done deal, in the sense that Sevilla know he's leaving and there's just a bit of negotiation with the club to get that over the line. But there's no problem with Kounde's injury. There's no problem with the personal terms with the players. So that signing for me, I think, is as good as definite now. It's just going to get a little bit of time to take it over the line in terms of the negotiation between the two clubs, and maybe unexpected time. Chelsea probably were hopeful of having this one done within the early part of the window. Yeah. Now they may need a week or two, but there's no panic there. I think Chelsea sources continue to intimate that that deal will be concluded, but is not yet a done deal. Dembele is the interesting one for Chelsea, because there's his desire to move to PSG, plus his offer with Barcelona that somehow Dembele thinks is going to be increased. And then there's the Chelsea factor. So you got Tuchel saying, I want Dembele, but nothing is agreed with the player yet. Don't be fooled by what you read. Nothing has been formally agreed with the player. So he may be open to a Chelsea move, or certainly open to deciding between Barcelona and Chelsea if those are his only 2 options, but nothing agreed yet with Chelsea Football Club. And Barcelona's offer probably won't be increased. And until you get a definite suitor come in, Barcelona have got the best of both worlds. They can have their cake and eat it. They can say, we're not going to increase our offer because we know that there's nothing concrete from anybody else yet. And then Dembele may have no choice but to sign that contract. But it's all a bit acrimonious. And the fact that Dembele's people are not communicating with Barcelona, they're not responding to the offer that's on the table yet, is annoying Xavi and Barcelona. So given they have to let some players go, I think they would like, if he's not just going to sign, a deal which is more financially prudent for Barcelona and within their current infrastructure and they can't be increasing offers, sets the wrong precedent, they're financially ruined. So to go back to Dembele and say, after all this time, here's a bit more money, it's not going to happen. So Dembele is basically going to either have to accept what he's offered at Barcelona, or someone's going to come in and have to make a concrete offer. And as things currently stand, Tuchel likes the player, but Chelsea have not broken the bank and offered some insane terms that surpass the deal Barcelona have put on the table. And that is why at the moment there is no progress on that deal. There is still a good chance that Chelsea will make Dembele their marquee signing. There's been no movement on that to date. And deep down, what provides the twist in all of this is that Dembele would still like to go to Barcelona, to PSG, if the opportunity presents itself. So I think now it's probably still 70-30 in Chelsea's favour if we're assessing and staying patient with this across the whole window, because at some point I expect Chelsea to put something specific on paper. But right now, Dembele's only got one single offer that he can sign if he wants to determine his future today, and that is staying at Barcelona. And until that changes and others come in, we're not going to get any movement on this. So this one's going to drag throughout the whole window.
Great update there. And Nathaniel here just asking for a quick update on Koulibaly's stroke centre-back situation. You've already mentioned the de facto done deal with Jules Kounde. Has there been any movement on Koulibaly or De Ligt in the space of the past few days?
Not since we last spoke on this show. So De Ligt and Koulibaly were two names that I said Chelsea were looking at in terms of possible defenders. And I think at the time that I said Koulibaly, that caught a few people by surprise, whereas the De Ligt one was kind of breaking in quite a widespread way. Two players that are on Chelsea's radar for sure. And my understanding is that Koulibaly would be tempted by a move to the Premier League and Chelsea specifically. The challenge with Koulibaly is whether Napoli are going to play hardball on the deal. And if they do, it becomes much more problematic. And obviously the second point is that Chelsea are not going to bring in De Ligt, Koulibaly and Kounde. So they're only going to push for one of the two. And this is one of the challenges at this early stage of the window, that these players can be pursued because Chelsea are assessing their options and seeing who is market value. And if they bring in Kounde, they get an out-and-out centre-back. And then is the second player that they want in defence more of a hybrid, someone that can play in a back three, someone that's a centre-back but can also move into the right-back position, or at least a right-sided centre-back and so on. And this will be in the thinking. And the other factor with Koulibaly is that he's 30 years of age. And I'm not saying that that's old and he's not at his peak, but when assessed against younger options, that may be a factor in Chelsea's strategic thinking as well. Certainly if the fee required moves into a higher territory. And when we're talking about fees required as well, we are not only on about, is there a transfer fee or how high is that transfer fee? And I think sometimes when you hear the word fee or package, fans leap to transfer fee. So with Dembele, they'll say, well, free transfer, what's the problem? But it's also wages, sign-on fees, agents' fees, all of which are declared on your books. So you have to kind of think about that too. And if Napoli start playing hardball, or if Koulibaly is looking for big money, wages, sign-on fees, and so on, that can be problematic too. I think at this point, it is probably fair to say that Koulibaly is a realistic option for Chelsea. But if you were to ask Chelsea, who would you rather have, Koulibaly or De Ligt? De Ligt would be ahead in the pecking order from those two, but that's not quite how the market works, because De Ligt is heavily in demand. And if Napoli don't play as hard ball as some over in Italy are saying, then Koulibaly will be a more attainable option than De Ligt in the short term. There'll be a much stronger race for De Ligt than Koulibaly as far as Premier League clubs are concerned.
Thank you for the update on that. Makes a great deal of sense to me, especially the free transfer stuff. I say it before, like I'm a massive detractor when it comes to like the phrase of net spend. It bothers me so much. I just, one, there's something to celebrate, and two, there's many more factors that go into it. Another deal which is kind of, it's been discussed on the show. I know you brought it up before, but Dean Jones mentioned it before, but it's kind of gone a bit, maybe because David Ornstein's tweeted about it. You've had the sort of Man United, Spurs in for Christian Eriksen, that kind of battle for him, as it were. What's the latest as far as you're aware around the pursuit of the attacking midfielder?
I think that Eriksen was never likely to stay with Brentford, especially after the impact that he had. And the kind of irony of all of this is that there were hundreds of suitors. Well, hundreds is an exaggeration, but there were dozens of suitors in for Eriksen when he first took the deal with Brentford, and yet only Brentford actually made him a firm contract offer because people were reticent about making the signing before seemingly seeing proof of, I don't want to say health, but form. And you can certainly have a long period out of the game and be a little bit rusty. But Eriksen kept up his fitness and sharpness and hit the ground running and was stunning for Brentford. And it's a shame, having backed him and brought him to the Premier League, that he isn't staying loyal to Brentford. But you can understand why, because there's so much interest in him. And at that point of Brentford signing him, Newcastle had looked at him, and Aston Villa had considered him, and Leeds United were a suitor. And as I understand it now, there's a sort of tier above those clubs in terms of where they finished last season that are now also chasing Eriksen. So it is true that Manchester United and Tottenham are the additional two clubs now looking at Christian Eriksen. Spurs haven't made any kind of offer. Manchester United have. And Eriksen is a smart signing, available on a free transfer, and has proven himself to still be at peak Premier League performance level from his short spell with Brentford. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Brentford, I believe, won 7 of the 11 matches in which Eriksen featured. They ended up being comfortably safe, and he made a big, big difference between Brentford potentially sliding into trouble and moving clear of it. So this is a natural fit for Manchester United in a position where they need to strengthen. And I think that from the quality of offers available to Eriksen, is going to be very difficult for him to turn it down. So the next question is, will a Spurs ramp up their efforts to sign him? And then Eriksen almost has to pick between staying in London and sentiment versus teaming up with Ten Hag and being part of a big change at Manchester United. And it's unclear at this stage whether Manchester United appeals to Eriksen or whether he's going to wait and see and assess. But it's a bit like Gareth Bale, two completely different sort of players. But Bale joked, and this is why I make the comparison, that he's got loads of offers. And my understanding when you talk to Eriksen sources is exactly the same. They laugh and say, yeah, we've got a lot of interest. So Manchester United making their offer clear is a statement of intent. And if they move quickly in the market, I think that they will be of appeal to Eriksen. But don't be at all surprised if Spurs also come in with a firm offer and then Eriksen has a big decision to make. And then, you know, he'd be weighing up staying in London, going back to a club that he's got a lot of respect for and love for, and Champions League football, versus Manchester United, very unclear, new manager, no Champions League football. When you weigh those two clubs up, you're sort of, if it's just on paper with your pros and cons list, you're talking about Tottenham being a move that I think you would take over Manchester United. But right now, there's no offer from Tottenham. There is a concrete offer from Manchester United. So Manchester United at this stage will be confident of being able to sign Eriksen, but a lot could change over the coming days with this particular transfer, simply because of the high demand for Eriksen.
Yeah, and I think what's intriguing is that there's slightly new information from yourself around United have put an offer in, Spurs haven't. I've heard some slightly different things that Spurs have. I'm not disputing you. I'm an aggregator. I just listen to all of it and put it all out there. I think what's intriguing, though, is as you say, is where the Spurs come. I think if Spurs come in and make this official, make it concrete, I can't see him picking Man United over Tottenham. As you say, for, yes, Champions League, and it's the familiarity of Spurs. He knows the area. He'll probably move back in and around the same place he lived before. That maybe with everything that's gone on in his life, that must feel like almost a bit of a dream come true, really. Plus, there's Champions League football. They've got a world-class manager at the football club. So it'll be a difficult one for United if Spurs come in. But a very talented player. And I think he proved when he came back to the Prem that although he's got obviously the heart condition now and the sort of defibrillator sort of built in, there was no signs of problems at all. He just looked the same Christian Eriksen that we'd already knew.
Yeah, I mean, he just hit the ground running. There's no reason why he wouldn't, because by all accounts, the defibrillator rule that forced him to leave Italy is written into the sort of bylaws of Serie A. But medically speaking, the other leagues are fully confident that it isn't a health risk. And therefore, with it, he's back to the same old Christian Eriksen in terms of his fitness, talent, ability. So the question mark was not necessarily over people not wanting to take him because of the health scare, because if that was the belief and the case or the default position of Premier League clubs, then it would end up being written into the Premier League rules potentially. So I think the challenge with Eriksen overtaking him is twofold. One is having left the Premier League and not actually had the best spell for large parts at Inter in terms of game time and so on. Was he actually at Premier League level? Then you look at the age. Then obviously you look at the fact that he was out of football for a long period, recovering and getting back to full fitness. So mid-season, you become worried about sharpness and value in the deal, even though you're not paying a transfer fee or anything. There's still wages and all of that. So that was probably a factor in thinking with a lot of clubs in January, particularly ones maybe at the lower end of the table, a Newcastle, a Leeds United. You're in a relegation scrap. You've got to hit the ground running. Is it worth taking a player at that age, at that level of fitness and sharpness after everything he's been through? In the summer, you can assess a little bit more. And Manchester United and Spurs, I think, wanted to see proof in the pudding, which is why they're coming in the summer and not January. Spurs have spoken to Christian Eriksen's people to determine things like package and availability, and is he open to coming back? And Eriksen, in return, will be thinking about Spurs. Where does he fit into the system? And will he get the sort of game time that he craves at his age? And I think the answer is absolutely. He would be a big part of Tottenham. Some players just don't want to go back, though. Bale wanted to go back to loan on Spurs. Does Christian Eriksen? Or is a fresh challenge under a manager like Ten Hag and a Manchester United revolution, is that part of his thinking? And that's based upon the personality. And the truth is, regardless of what you read, I'm not going to sit here and tell you something when I don't have the information. I'm not going to speculate over it. Right now, I am told by Eriksen's people directly that he simply hasn't decided. And probably the reason why he hasn't decided is because offers are coming in thick and fast. And then what he decides will be based on a number of things. But it wouldn't surprise me if Champions League football is a big lure. And I think you make a good point as well, Terry, that if the option to stay in London, stay settled after everything that he's been through, kind of is there solidly on paper and presents itself, that might factor into his thinking as well. But I think the situation's too fluid to come down definitively and say anything other than confirm the very good story by David Ornstein, who's usually incredibly reliable and one of the best in the business, that it is true that Manchester United have made an offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when the Ornsteins of this world and so forth kind of talk, and I'm when they sort of come out with things, it's normally when everybody goes, okay, cool. All the other journalists that I've seen, I'm now going to listen to them and, what they said was true. You almost kind of get that kind of confirmation, as it were, that this thing can happen. And it's going to be an interesting one. We had a comment that came through from Billy T that says, are United looking to bring in a striker? Now, there were reports yesterday from the likes of Tom McDermott and a few other journalists whose names now elude me that United may now have abandoned their attempt to sign a number 9 after missing out on Darwin Núñez. Have you heard similar?
I think that Manchester United and Núñez was an interesting process because Liverpool, I wouldn't say came in late, because they were talking to Núñez when the teams played in the Champions League and Virgil van Dijk was sort of whispering in his ear, and he was playing, let's not forget, like right in front of Klopp. So that solidified in Klopp's mind that Núñez was a player that Liverpool wanted. And then they obviously have been able to move quite fast as far as the negotiation is concerned. Manchester United thought they were close, and very often a player will agree terms with 2 different clubs. And United felt maybe 3 weeks ago that they were getting very close to agreeing terms with the player. But it turns out when Liverpool came in, it was a fast process because the only thing the player wanted was to play under Klopp, who he considers to be just about the best manager in the world at the moment. And my understanding in terms of replacing Núñez, if you like, or using that money to fill a similar position, is that United are resigned to the fact that they're not going to get Lewandowski. And even if Lewandowski didn't want to go to Barcelona, the destination would not be Manchester United. And he's a player in a more defined striker role that Manchester United have looked at. So in the absence of him and with other positions that need strengthening, it probably is true that United and Ten Hag don't count the striker position, the defined traditional striker position, as a number one target. But that's not to say that they won't move in the market if the right name materializes. But what United desperately need to look at first is that midfield and defensive position. So I wouldn't quite go so far as to say that they won't bring in a striker, but what I would say is that it won't be a Lewandowski, and they won't like for like just take money allocated for Núñez and try and find a replacement. But if we take traditional striker out of the mix and then look and see whether there's a sort of Núñez style player that's a bit more versatile, then they could invest a bit of time and money on a Rafinha style player. Of course, there'll be people watching that say, well, a Leeds player won't go to Manchester United. And that's probably true, by the way, with Calvin Phillips, who's much more likely to consider a Man City or even a Chelsea, who have vaguely, don't want to spark anything too concrete on this, but they vaguely looked at him, but kind of determined that if that much money is spent, it would be Rice over Calvin Phillips. But who's to say that Manchester United won't try and poach a Rafinha from a Leeds United and put themselves into the mix there? So don't rule out them strengthening in the forward line, but definitely a De Jong and a defensive reinforcement will be the priority under Ten Hag first.
Yeah, and I'll make it right. I mean, there's some comments there that KJ put up. You know, Laurie Whitwell spoke about Martial being given another chance. There's been a number of reports speaking of the manager wanting to try and fix the broken players like Marcus Rashford. And that's easier to do than plugging holes with no players in midfield. You know, I think the attacking element, yes, there are still goals in that team. If Martial and Rashford find form, if Jadon Sancho gets back to his Bundesliga level, we'll score goals this season. It's that midfield area. We've got no engine. We've got no middle, you know, especially with people leaving. Defensively, there's troubles there as well. And I'm getting some pelters online. I like literally as this tweet came through to me, you just said what you said, that players can agree terms with more than one club at once. A player can be, because you actually think about it now, Eriksen's considering multiple offers from multiple clubs. People act like these transfers are almost not even they're binary. One player, one club. That's all these transfers are the whole way through. You must get a lot of that in your kind of replies. Like you might tweet something today, and then in 3 weeks you tweet about another team showing interest, and you get you said that Chelsea were in for him. Well, they are, but now Arsenal are as well. Like I don't understand why football fans struggle with this concept so much.
Well, I just think it's that you have a need as your club moves into the market to know what's going on. Why wouldn't you? You're a football fan. And journalists have a need to keep across the story. So you can either agree not to look at what's out there and then at the end of the window, turn on your computer and see who your club signed, or you can ask for daily updates and then not a lot's going to have changed, or things may change and become less clear because there's multiple suitors. And I think that transfers can work in different ways, obviously. Some are lined up windows ahead. Some happen opportunistically. Some get hijacked. Some don't. Some are completely secret and take us by surprise, but they've been worked on for a long while. Others are absolutely obvious because the clubs choose to speak very publicly about ongoing negotiations or discussions. And then as a journalist, we approach a deal by talking to the player or people close to them, by talking to the agent, by talking to the buying club, by talking to the selling club. And you will get different narratives. And when you get a narrative from one club, you report that. And it's either correct at the time, or it may move and have to be taken with a pinch of salt. So when AC Milan tell me that they are confident in signing Sven Botman and believe the player wants to join them over Newcastle United, you'll report that, but it has to be prefaced with almost a disclaimer that Newcastle United are also saying they're confident in signing the player, and it's untrue that Sven Botman wants to join Milan. So then what you're looking for is balance. And if you're on Twitter, there's not enough characters always for balance. When you come on a podcast, I'll get accused of rambling. I'll get accused of talking for too long. But I'm trying to give you the insight, and the insight is fluid and developing until a deal is done. And anybody that comes on a podcast and says, this is definite, this is likely to happen, fans will love it. It will go viral on Twitter. It will get more engagement. It will get you more followers. But it's just not true in 99% of cases, because situations change and are fluid. So you can either listen to a rambling journo like me trying to tell you the current situation as it evolves, or you can basically be happy that your side has, in inverted commas, got a player, but then bear in mind that may not materialize because the player you think you've got could have agreed a deal with 6 clubs.
And this is it. And this is what you get, Ben. Sorry to interject. And this is it. My point for years, I love the transfer window because I find the fluidity of it is what I enjoy. Wow. So I love the fact that Arsenal were the front runners for Gabriel Jesus. I love the fact that Chelsea are involved. I like the fact that Spurs are just there in the background, because at any moment, Harry Kane might go into pre-season training and rupture a cruciate ligament day 1. Suddenly, Spurs' interest in Gabriel Jesus can change. And I hope that doesn't happen to Harry Kane, by the way, or any player for that fact. But the point is, at any moment, these situations can change and they can move. And the fact that fans, they want what I call bullet point journalism. They want Arsenal are in for Gabriel Jesus and they're leading the race. And then after that, they don't want to hear about any other club that is also interested, when in reality, 3, 4, 5, 6 clubs could be involved and could be motoring forward and stuff like that. It strikes football fans have become very strange around the transfer market. You know, they want the confirmation bias. They only want to listen to positive news from their club. You know, even today you said about Chelsea, I saw a few comments. Oh, you know, you're not very but not being very nice to Chelsea today. Ben ain't here to be nice or horrible. He's here to tell you what's going on. It's not Ben's fault. It's mad. It's crazy to me. But that's just my take. There's a comment here that says, can you ask Ben about Calvin Phillips to Manchester City? I just saw he's going to City for 55 million.
Yeah, I mean, Phillips is available in the market. That's one thing to state definitively. And as we discussed in the last answer or so, this notion of Manchester United, even though he'd be a perfect signing, is unlikely. I don't think that Phillips is particularly allured by United, by the culture there, even under Ten Hag. A lot needs to change at Manchester United, and Leeds to Manchester United is obviously quite a contentious transfer as well. So that allows for a possible move to Manchester City over Manchester United. I know that there are some reports out there that Manchester City are considering a bid. It's not my understanding at this point that anything official has been tabled. So Guardiola certainly admires Phillips, and what makes that transfer seemingly, anyway, speaking to sources, a bit of a bargain is that the transfer fee will be nowhere near the kind of price being quoted for Declan Rice. If anything, Phillips is sort of a half-price version of Declan Rice due to various circumstances, and yet both have great quality. So it would be a logical fit for a Manchester City. Chelsea, as I've already said, have looked at Phillips historically in the past. There doesn't appear to be any substance in them making a bid at this point. But again, Chelsea do need somebody in that position as well. So it's one to watch over the coming weeks, but I would call it closer to rumour than reality at this stage. I would say that City are definitely interested in a player like Phillips, but they haven't upped anything yet to the point of tabling an official offer. But it wouldn't remotely surprise me if this one gathers legs as the window progresses.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, they definitely want that, as you say, that midfield player. You know, they're looking at So one of the reasons why Liverpool fans are really happy a day or two ago about Darwin, they're now getting frustrated that their club may not be signing a midfielder, and City could be improving in that area as well. And it feels like this week, after the Nunes deal, the market's starting to like pick up a little bit of pace now. And if you're somebody, I will say this to anyone watching, if you are of a nervous disposition, if you don't like the idea of other clubs coming in for your players, switch off your TVs, delete Twitter, go away until the end of August, essentially, because there's going to be a lot of to and fro in this year. There's many clubs with lots of money fighting out for a number of players. And for me, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very, very, very excited about this transfer window because it's all fun and games. Like, yeah, I want my players to get my club to get all the best players, but I just enjoy it. I'm just waking up this morning to the Bissouma news. I was like, oh, wow, that come out of nowhere. And they're my favorite. They're my favorite. The ones that just kind of come out of nowhere, just all of a sudden. So, yeah, they're absolutely brilliant. A lot of people are asking for Declan Rice news. I don't suppose there is any new Declan Rice news at the moment, is there? Nothing's progressed or changed in the last few weeks.
Not that I've got. So the last I was asking about Declan Rice from a few different sources was whether it's gamesmanship or reality from West Ham United's position of not wanting to sell, and or at what fee do they change that position. And the more the figure rises, the more West Ham are seemingly sticking to their position of simply not for sale at this point. So my understanding remains that Declan Rice won't be sold by West Ham pretty much for any fee. And the fee that you see quoted ranges from 90 all the way up to 150. And I think that 90 is market value for Rice. 100 is good business for West Ham. 110, 120 is like Leicester's 80 million for Maguire. It's incredible business for West Ham, especially if they can line up a replacement. And even at those sky-high figures, West Ham are seemingly still sticking to their guns, which is very frustrating for the suitors that are interested in him. And beyond that figure, I don't see any of the Premier League suitors circling Rice, Chelsea in particular, paying remotely close to that, not in this window. And therefore, I think that Rice is, as he was, will be at West Ham come the first kick of the season and beyond when the window shuts.
There we go. Ben, an absolute pleasure as always to chat to you. Some real intriguing stuff today. And viewers, I know Ben's already said it himself, and I will blow a bit of smoke here. Listen to everything that's being said, not just the punt. Like the punt, you know, what you're looking for is the advanced, the done deal, the personal terms are no problems, but you listen to the rest of the story. Who else is involved? What else is going on? That's where the real nuggets are, because things happen and change all the time. And that's where it's explained, but people don't. They just want the headlines. Listen to the body of the work as well. You know, Twitter is great because Twitter, you put the thing in, the player's on or something's advanced, but click on the link, read the article, click on the link, watch the video in its entirety before you even make a judgment. That is my advice to people. That's how you learn some stuff. A lot of people asking about Vitinha, the Porto midfielder to Man United. I think he was on loan a season or two ago at Wolves. I swear he was at loan on Wolves a little while ago. There are some reports that United are interested in him. Keep an eye on it from Alex Crook, but it's all we know as of right now. I'm sure things will all transpire on there. Ben, absolute pleasure as always. Until next time, everybody, take care. Goodbye. God bless. Smash the like button before you leave, and we'll see you all again soon.